Kitab al-Iman, excuse me. Kitab al-Iman, the book of faith, the book of Iman. In that particular book, he brings chapter after chapter, bringing hadiths about Iman. And all of those narrations are refutations upon the different deviant groups. So here we see again that it is the noble scholars of hadith who have been always at the forefront of the refutation of the people of innovation and leading the way for the people of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah in general. This is all leading up, this is basically an introduction leading up to that which we wanted to mention, and the importance of the women also learning these particular affairs, bi-idhnillahi tabarak wa ta'ala. And then he goes on to mention, وَلَقَدْ إِرْتَأَى عُلَمَاء الْحَدِيثِ أَنَّ صِيَانَةَ الْفِقْرِ الإسلامي من أوجب الواجبات، وهذا يعني العمل على ترسيخ وتدعيم فكر أهل السنة والجماعة وحمايته من كل دخيل. And then he said that the scholars of the past have always saw that it is incumbent upon us to protect this particular affair of hadith and sunnah, and it's from the most of the obligatory matters. And he said, and this is from the affair that there is no question of defending it from everything that would enter into it. Defending this religion and defending this knowledge from everything that would enter into it. سواء كان ذلك في المساجد أو المجالس. He says whether that be in the masajid, the masjids, or in the different sittings of knowledge, أو في مؤسسات تعليمية, or whether it even be in the different schools that have been established for the learning. كما صار إليه الأمر في وقت اللاحق. So just as we have seen in the later days. So whether these lessons are happening in the masajid, whether they're happening in the homes, wherever they may be, it is incumbent upon us to preserve this knowledge. And it is incumbent upon us to defend this knowledge. And then he goes on to mention, and this shows us some of the important narrations of the women of the past who began to learn the affairs of knowledge and to defend these particular matters. لقد جلست أم الدرداء رضي الله عنها في حلق القراء وتتعلم القرآن وتعلمه وتكتب للطلبة على الألواح. And then it mentions that Darda, from the noble companion Darda, that it mentions that she used to sit in the sittings of the reciters of the Quran, and she used to learn the Quran, and she used to teach the Quran to the other women, and she used to write upon the different boards that I was teaching the women the recitations and like this of the Quran. This is collected by Ibn Asakir fi Tarazim al-Nisa. Ibn Asakir, the noble scholar who has many of the books of tarikh, the books of histories of the different companions and the different narrators of the past, Ibn Asakir, he collects in this particular book of his, the biographies of the women scholars. And we will mention, inshallah, as we proceed, that many of the books of hadith that have been written, that they always bring in the last chapters of those books, the biographies of many of the scholars from amongst the women. So you have the book, for example, of Tahdib al-Tahdib, just to give you a name. And don't concern yourself necessarily with the names of the books right now, or any of the real technical information. We'll concern ourselves with the general information, inshallah. And then as we review, and as we learn and continue to study, then we can concern ourselves with the specifics. But we'll mention the name of the book because it's important for us, inshallah, in the future to know these particular names. Anyway, Imam Ibn Hajar, he has the book Tahdib al-Tahdib. In that particular book, he brings the biographies of the narrators of hadith, the biographies of the different scholars from the past. And in the last volume, then he brings Tarazim al-Nisa, the biographies of the women scholars of hadith, the women narrators of hadith. And as we'll read from these different narrators and these different women narrators, and we'll read their legacy and their histories, we'll see the encouragement upon the sisters to continue to benefit and learn in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not to mention, inshallah ta'ala, I have prepared for the sisters a handout, but forgot to bring it. So inshallah, as the brothers can remind me next week, we can bring the handout for the sisters of the histories of many of the women scholars of Islam. Naam. So now in mentioning that, we'll mention some of the names and some of the different benefits. For example, from the Tarikh of Imam al-Bukhari, he has the book Tarikh al-Kabir. Tarikh al-Kabir, for example, which is the book of the biographies of the scholars. In that book, he has the history of many of the women scholars. We have, for example, the Tarikh Baghdad, the book known as Tarikh Baghdad, the history of Baghdad by Khatib al-Baghdadi, again collecting the biographies and the history of the women scholars that were in Baghdad, or the scholars in Baghdad, and again he brings a specific chapter or chapters with regards to the women scholars of Baghdad also. Also there's the book Tarikh Dimashq, the book of the history of Damascus, Ibn Asakir, the same scholar that we just mentioned. And so it is in there he also brings the biography of the women of the salaf. وتهذيب الكمال المزي, and then we have تهذيب الكمال الإمام المزي. And he also again bringing the biographies of the scholars, he brings specifically the biographies also. وروايته ومد حرصهم على تعليمهم إياه لمهج القلوب الأحبة كالبنات والزوجات والموالي من النساء. And this is a very important point that we see that amongst the companions and the books of the Sahaba and the books of Ansab, the books of the history like this, we see a tremendous ghira, we see a tremendous desire of the teachers to teach their beloved ones this knowledge. We see a tremendous desire of the ones who want to teach their beloved ones. A man wants to teach his wife. A man wants to teach his daughters. A man wants to teach his sisters. And like this, so therefore we find in many of these particular books, we see the ardent desire of these noble scholars teaching their daughters, teaching their sisters, teaching their wives, and to the end of that. And this is أَلَمْ يَكُنْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ السِّبَاقِ إِلَى كُلِّ ذَلِكَ. Do we not see that the Prophet ﷺ was from the first of that? The one who taught his wives? Was it not the Prophet ﷺ who used to teach Fatima, his daughter Fatima? Was it not the Prophet ﷺ who used to give specific kalam or teachings to his wives? Was it not the Prophet ﷺ who was concerned with teaching the women? So we see the importance of teaching our sisters, our daughters, our mothers, and the likes of this. And this is an encouragement for those brothers who have wives, the ikhwan, to make sure that we're educating our wives. When we come to the lessons, for example, and we learn, then it is important for us to go home and to educate our wives in the same manner that we have come to educate ourselves in the sittings of knowledge. And this is what the salaf used to see. أَلَمْ يَعْلَمْ أَحَبَّ النَّاسِ إِلَى قَلْبِهِ وَالسَّيِّدَةِ النِّسَاءِ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ فِي الْجَنَّةِ فَاطِمَةِ. And then he goes on to mention, did the people not see that the Prophet ﷺ, that he used to teach the most beloved of the people to his heart, his daughter Fatima, she was one of the most beloved of the people to the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. And to the point that it mentions that whenever he would come home from a travel, he used to first go and visit his daughter Fatima. He used to go to visit Fatima, radiallahu anha. Do we not see the many narrations where the Prophet ﷺ used to teach his daughter Fatima? وَمِثْلُهَا أَخَوَاتُهَا, and like her sisters, meaning the other daughters of the Prophet ﷺ. أَلَمْ تَكُنْ عَيْشَةٌ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهَا مِنْ أَكْثَرِ الصَّحَابَةِ دِرَايَةً وَمَعْرِفَةً بِعِلْمِ الْحَدِيثِ وَرِوَايَتِهِ. Was not our mother Aisha from the companions who narrated the most hadith on the Prophet ﷺ? Was she not, as we always mentioned, the 7 narrators who narrated the most narrations upon the Prophet ﷺ? Aisha is from the Muqtirin min al-Sahaba. She is from the companions who narrated the most hadith on the Prophet ﷺ. This is a direct result of the fact that the Prophet used to educate his wife, Aisha radiallahu anha. ومنه صلى الله عليه وسلم تعلم الصحابة الكرام المبدأ ذاته تعلموا بناتهم علم الرواية وعلموهن مما ملكوا من دراية وتجربة في ذلك. And again the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said from that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, after teaching his companions, then they would begin to teach their daughters. So this was a legacy that was carried on. They see that the Prophet ﷺ taught his daughter, Fatima's other daughters. And he would teach them. So they would take that example and they would therefore return it and they would teach their wives, teach their daughters. They found that the knowledge was important for their daughters to learn. Knowledge was important for their wives to learn. Not leaving their wives ignorant. Not leaving their daughters ignorant. Not leaving them not understanding the religion of Islam. But finding the education of the women important in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a refutation upon the enemies of Islam. A refutation upon the enemies of Islam who claim that Islam calls to leaving women ignorant, or that we don't believe in teaching the women. This is